Every single day, roughly 40 ships pass through a ditch in Central America. 40 ships carrying everything from Chinese electronics to Brazilian soybeans to liquefied natural gas heading for terminals in Japan. And every single one of those ships pays a toll, sometimes $250,000, sometimes more. The most expensive single transit ever recorded cost over $4 million. Not because the toll was that high, but because a shipping company paid that much just to skip the line. To skip the line at a canal. In a country most Americans couldn't find on a map without Google. And that canal, that 50-mile stretch of concrete, water, and engineering, quietly controls more of your daily life than your government does. The price of the gas in your car, the cost of the food on your table, the availability of the phone in your pocket, all of it passes through Panama, all of it. And the story of how that canal got there, who paid for it, who died for it, who profited from it, and who got robbed, is one of the ugliest, most financially ruthless stories in modern history. But it's dressed up so nicely in textbooks that most people walk away thinking it's a tale of human achievement. It is, but achievement for whom? That's the question nobody wants to sit with. Let's start with the French, because everyone forgets the French. The year is 1879. Ferdinand de Lesseps is the most famous engineer diplomat in the world. He just pulled off the Suez Canal, a waterway through Egypt connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. It made him a legend. It made France proud. And it made investors very, very rich. So when de Lesseps announced he was going to do it again, this time through the jungles of Central America, connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific, money came pouring in. French citizens bought bonds in his company, the Compagnie Universelle du Canal Interoceanique, like they were buying lottery tickets. Except these weren't wealthy speculators. These were ordinary people, teachers, bakers, retired soldiers living on pensions. Over 800,000 individual French citizens invested their savings into this project. 800,000 families betting on the man who had already done the impossible once. On paper, it looked harmless. A canal, a business venture, a great national enterprise. But here's the part they don't teach you. Panama was not Egypt. The Suez Canal was dug through flat, dry desert. Brutal work, yes, but geometrically simple. Panama was a nightmare wrapped in vegetation. Tropical jungle so thick you couldn't see 10 feet in front of you. Mountains that shouldn't have been there, according to early surveys. Rivers that changed course during rainy seasons that lasted half the year. And disease, yellow fever and malaria, killing workers at a pace that would make a battlefield blush. Nobody understood mosquito-borne illness yet. Workers would arrive healthy and be dead within weeks. The French set up hospitals that became morgues. They brought in doctors who had no idea what they were fighting. And the workers kept dying. Kept dying. Who were these workers? Not Frenchmen. Overwhelmingly, they were black Caribbean men, recruited from Jamaica, Barbados, Martinique, St. Lucia, Guadeloupe. Recruited with promises of wages that looked good on paper and conditions that were supposed to be manageable. What they found was hell with a paycheck. Many historians estimate the French phase of construction killed around 20,000 workers. 20,000 human beings. Some estimates run higher. And these weren't soldiers who signed up knowing they might die. These were laborers looking for a better life, who found shallow graves in a jungle that nobody in Paris could even picture. A sea-level canal, same as Suez, despite his own engineers telling him the terrain made that approach nearly impossible. The costs spiraled. The company went back to investors again and again, issuing new bonds, raising more capital, burning through it, and coming back for more. And this is where things get genuinely criminal. The company bribed French journalists to suppress negative stories. They bribed members of parliament, over 100 of them according to the subsequent investigation, to authorize new bond issues. They lied about progress. They fabricated timelines. They told 800,000 investors that everything was on track, while the project was collapsing in real time. In 1889, the company went bankrupt. Gone, finished. The largest financial scandal France had ever seen. Savings wiped out overnight. The political fallout was nuclear. De Lesseps was convicted of fraud. His son went to prison. Gustave Eiffel, yes, the Eiffel Tower guy, was implicated as a subcontractor and barely survived with his name intact. And the scandal took on a vicious anti-Semitic dimension, because several of the financial intermediaries were Jewish. The French press weaponized that fact. Many scholars draw a straight line from the Panama scandal to the Dreyfus affair, the wrongful treason conviction of a Jewish army officer that tore France apart a few years later. A canal in Central America helped poison the politics of a European nation 5,000 miles away. That's how financial disasters work. They don't stay where they started, they metastasize. So now it's the early 1900s, and there's a half-dug ditch in Panama. Rusting French equipment, sinking into mud, and tens of thousands of dead workers whose names nobody bothered to record. Enter the United States, enter Theodore Roosevelt, and enter a playbook of financial and political manipulation so brazen it would make a Wall Street banker nervous. Roosevelt wanted a canal. America needed a canal. The Spanish-American War of 1898 had made it painfully obvious. The battleship USS Oregon had to sail from San Francisco all the way around South America to reach Cuba. It took 67 days. A canal through Central America would cut that to hours. The military argument was undeniable, but the economic argument was even bigger. Whoever controlled a shortcut between the Atlantic and the Pacific controlled the most valuable trade route on the planet. Whoever collected the tolls owned a money machine that would run for centuries. But there was a problem. Panama wasn't a country. It was a province of Colombia. And when the U.S. negotiated a treaty with Colombia for the right to build a canal, the Colombian Senate rejected it. They wanted more money, better terms, more sovereignty protections. They were, by any honest assessment, looking out for their own national interests. Reasonable. Yes, acceptable to Theodore Roosevelt? Absolutely not. What happened next is one of the most audacious acts of financial imperialism in history, and it gets maybe 2 paragraphs in most American textbooks. The United States backed a Panamanian separatist movement. Revolution is generous. Most historians describe it as closer to a staged event. And in November 1903, Panama declared independence from Colombia. American warships conveniently sat offshore, preventing Colombian troops from landing to suppress the revolt. The whole thing was over in days, almost no shots fired. And the brand new nation of Panama, grateful and vulnerable, signed a treaty giving the United States control of a 10-mile wide strip across the entire country, the Canal Zone, in perpetuity, forever. The price? $10 million, and an annual payment of $250,000. Let me say that again. The most strategically valuable piece of real estate in the Western Hemisphere was leased forever for $10 million. That's not a deal. That's a mugging with a receipt. This is the kind of history that History Finance Files digs into. The moments where financial power doesn't just influence events, but literally creates nations, redraws borders, and sets terms that last for generations. If this way of seeing the world is useful to you, subscribing is worth considering. Because this stuff doesn't stop. It's still happening. Construction under American control began in earnest in 1904. And credit where it's due, the Americans learned from French mistakes. Chief Engineer John Frank Stevens, and later George Washington Goethals, scrapped the sea-level design and built a lock-based system. Raise the ships up, float them across an artificial lake, lower them down the other side. Colonel William Gorgas, an Army medical officer, waged war on mosquitoes with a ruthlessness that bordered on obsession. Draining swamps, oiling standing water, screening every window in every building. Yellow fever deaths dropped to near zero. It was a public health triumph, and it saved the project. But here's the part that gets scrubbed clean in most retellings. The labor force was organized on an openly racial hierarchy. White American employees were paid on what was called the gold roll, literally paid in gold-backed currency. They got better housing, better food, better hospitals, social clubs, schools for their children. Black Caribbean workers, who made up the vast majority of the workforce, were paid on the silver roll, paid in local currency worth less, housed in inferior quarters, fed worse food, treated in separate, lesser-equipped medical facilities. This wasn't hidden, it was policy. Written down, administered bureaucratically. A Jim Crow labor system exported to the tropics and embedded into the most important infrastructure project of the 20th century. Around 5,000 workers died during the American construction phase. Most of them silver roll. Most of them unnamed in any official memorial. The canal opened on August 15, 1914, 2 weeks after World War I started. The timing is almost absurd. Humanity's greatest engineering achievement unveiled at the exact moment humanity began its greatest act of self-destruction. But the canal worked. Ships that previously spent weeks sailing around Cape Horn could now cross in hours. New York to San Francisco dropped from over 13,000 miles to roughly 5,000. Freight costs plummeted, trade routes reorganized. Port cities that had thrived on the old routes withered. Port cities near the canal boomed. The entire economic geography of the Americas shifted. And it shifted according to who controlled that 50-mile ribbon of water. And for 65 years, that was the United States. The Canal Zone operated as an American colony inside a sovereign nation. American laws, American police, American courts, American schools, where Panamanian children were not welcome, American swimming pools, American grocery stores stocked with American products. Panamanians could see the zone. It cut their country in half, but couldn't enter it without permission. They watched American families live middle-class lives on Panamanian soil, while Panamanian families in the surrounding neighborhoods lived in poverty. The resentment wasn't subtle. It was structural. It was daily, and it built for decades, like pressure in a pipe. January 9th, 1964. Panamanian students tried to raise their flag alongside the American flag in the Canal Zone. American students tore it, riots erupted. Panamanian civilians surged toward the zone. American soldiers opened fire. 22 Panamanians were killed. Some accounts say more. The event is called Martyrs' Day in Panama. It's a national holiday. In the United States, most people have never heard of it. That asymmetry, that gap between what matters to the powerful and what matters to the powerless, tells you everything about how the canal relationship actually worked. The transfer came eventually. The Torrijos-Carter treaties of 1977 set a timeline. December 31st, 1999. The canal became Panamanian property. Many American politicians screamed about it. We built it. We paid for it. It's ours. And they weren't entirely wrong about the investment, but they were entirely silent about what that investment had cost the people who lived on top of it. Every argument for keeping the canal was a financial argument. Every argument against returning it was also a financial argument. The morality was window dressing either way. This was always about money, always. And here's what's interesting, what complicates every simple narrative about colonial exploitation. Panama has run the canal brilliantly. Toll revenues have increased dramatically under Panamanian management. A massive expansion, completed in 2016, added new, larger locks capable of handling the giant container ships that dominate modern global trade. Revenue exceeds $3 billion a year. Panama City has transformed into a gleaming financial hub. The canal didn't just generate wealth, it generated sovereignty. Real sovereignty, the kind backed by cash flow, not just flags, but the dependency cuts deep. In 2023, drought, driven by El Nino and accelerating climate instability, dropped water levels in Gatun Lake, the artificial reservoir that feeds the entire lock system. The canal had to restrict traffic. Fewer ships per day, longer waits. And the global economy flinched. Shipping companies bid millions just to maintain their slots. Liquefied natural gas shipments to Asia were delayed. Grain shipments from the American Gulf Coast backed up. Consumer prices in countries thousands of miles from Panama ticked upward because a lake in the jungle didn't have enough rain. 5% of global maritime trade passes through that canal. 5% sounds small until it's your 5%. Your gas, your grain, your goods sitting on a container ship anchored outside Colon, waiting for a slot that might not come for 2 weeks. And now there's China, Panama's second largest canal user. Beijing has been expanding commercial influence in Panama for years. Port operations, infrastructure deals, diplomatic ties. Panama switched its diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China in 2017. American strategists noticed the same logic that drove Teddy Roosevelt in 1903. This shortcut is too important to leave in someone else's hands, is creeping back into Washington's thinking. Different century, different empire, same anxiety, same calculus, same refusal to let a small country on a critical choke point make its own choices without supervision. The canal is 50 miles long. A boat can cross it in about 10 hours. 10 hours to pass through a place that took decades to build, killed tens of thousands of workers, bankrupted one European nation, created another nation from scratch, served as an American colony for most of a century, and now sits at the intersection of great power rivalry all over again. 10 hours, but the debts run longer than that. The Caribbean workers who dug the canal with their hands and died without headstones, their descendants live in Panama today, in communities that still carry the economic scars of the Silver Roll. The French pensioners who lost their savings in 1889, that wound shaped French politics for a generation. The Panamanian students shot dead in 1964. Their faces are on murals in Panama City, but their names mean nothing in the country that killed them. Every ship that passes through the locks pays a toll. Every toll is a tiny echo of a transaction that started over a century ago, when powerful men decided that geography was too valuable to leave in the hands of the people who lived on it. One of the great achievements of the human species. But it was built on bones and fraud and stolen sovereignty. And the people who built it were paid in a currency designed to be worth less than the currency paid to the people who watched them build it. That's not a footnote, that's the foundation. And the ships keep passing, and the tolls keep collecting. And the water in Gatun Lake keeps rising and falling with the rain. And nobody standing on the bridge of a container ship, carrying 4,000 units of flat-screen televisions, thinks about any of this for even a second. That's the real achievement, not the canal itself. The forgetting